Grant Williams speaks, what he had to say about being suspended. I'll let you hear all of what he had to say. Plus, crossover previewing Celtics-Cavs with Chris Manning of Locked On Cavs right now on the Locked On Celtics podcast.
Be ever ready. Recognize the city of champs. Boston, baby, we do what you can. Locked on number 18, Tatum and Brown, J-team, step back. We gon' wet that and slay teams. Of course, the Celtics, who else could it be? Screaming like KG with the Larry O.B. Karalis above average, assessing the team status. Best daily pod, no cap, salary matching. Clutch like Bird the DJ, keep John on replay. Prime time, dapping up the truth on the sideline. Raining J's, how it started, raising banners, how we finished. Locked on Celtics pod, home of the winners. B.
Hey, welcome back to the Locked On Celtics podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm here for you every day with a fresh, free podcast wherever podcasts exist and on YouTube. So subscribe wherever you enjoy your podcast. Thank you so much for making this your first listen every day. I'm John Karalis, former professional basketball player a long, long time ago. But I'm also now covering the Celtics for Boston Sports Journal. And I wrote a book called The Boston Celtics All-Time All-Stars. Today, later on, segments 2 and 3, crossover conversation with Chris Manning, previewing the Cavs. If you haven't been watching the Cavs, everything you need to know about the Celtics matchup against the Cavaliers coming up Friday night. But let's start here with Grant Williams, suspended officially for one game. He spoke to the media at practice. I've had a lot to say about Grant Williams, and I think it's only fair that I let him speak for himself. So here is everything Grant Williams had to say at practice.
What were your thoughts upon hearing that you would be suspended for one game for happening?
Disappointed for sure. I was more so disappointed about missing the game. Definitely one of those things where you never want to let your team down. It's something I feel like I did. When it comes to the punishment, it's just, I made a mistake. So for me, something that I probably won't challenge in a sense, especially the fact that it's one, it's a female referee too. It's not something that we want our players to be doing in the league. So no matter if it was inadvertent or not, I got to be better. I got to be more mindful. Got to be more conscious of my surroundings, more conscious of my mental state, and not letting things affect me during the game.
Mark Davis said after the game that it was intentional.
No.
The way he saw it.
No. Never that.
So what happened in that moment? Just kind of take us through.
Yeah, it was probably a succession of calls that I disagreed with, and then after the moving screen call, I just kind of was questioning. So I think there's a little bit of emotion in the moment. And then that next play was directly afterwards when I took the charge, which I feel like if it was a bang-bang play, you probably could go either way with it. Probably looks like more like a charge to my eyes. And then it was called a block, and I looked up, and I saw a block, and I just kind of got up and tried to run off, like just in disagreement. And then I look up, and I was like, oh crap, I'm about to make contact. I literally see in the video, I tried to avoid it, and that's when my glute hit her hip. And that's why I want to make contact. It's one of those things like similar in the game prior, Vucevic, when he tried to throw the ball down, and Natalie was under him, but she ducks. So it's like things like that in a position like you're just kind of emotion-wise, you're going. And like I definitely nowhere near intentional, nowhere near anything of that nature.
Grant, your emotions fuel you. You're that kind of a player.
Yep.
Sometimes these kind of things happen. How can you use your emotion for good in these cases?
Yeah, I have to be more positive in a sense. Just understanding of the moment, especially down in the fourth quarter like that. You don't need to add on to the game that we weren't having a good game in anyway. So I think there's a little bit of youth in mind. I have to be better in a sense of just being more mature and understanding that your emotion is good is what makes you so great of a player. It's just a matter of channeling that and using it in a better direction. And using that, whether that's directing it towards your teammates, making sure everybody's engaged and motivated, directing it towards yourself if you're not having a great game yourself. So I feel like that's the next step in development.
When you're frustrated, how much can that kind of distract you from the game? Do you feel that with yourself sometimes in a team that can kind of take you out of the game? And how tough is it to not show your frustration on that?
Yeah, so normally I feel like calls don't distract me. For that possession, I talk to everyone. I'm a talker. Sometimes I just want to be heard. So sometimes it's less so I'm disagreeing with a call. I'm just communicating. And most referees know that, and that's the relationship that we've built throughout the years. They're comfortable. That's why they let me go all the time. And known to be that type of player. But in the moments where I am becoming absorbed, it's more so like I have to be more absorbed in the game itself and not absorbed in what's going on around me. Not letting extrinsic things affect my mental. Not letting things that I'm doing myself affect the mental, because being more positive and understanding just taking a moment to take a step back and take a deep breath, that helps a lot. That helps any player. Any player that plays with passion and emotion knows that. And there's so much love for the game, you just kind of get overwhelmed sometimes. So for me, I just have to understand how and when. I'm not saying that won't happen again, in the sense of like my emotions taking the best. So it's just a matter of not letting that become a recurring thing and making sure that it's rare and not something that's natural.
I know your interactions with officials, it's not always complaining or showing that frustration. You talk before games, probably go back and forth in games. How have you kind of learned to best interact with them?
Yeah, every official is different. That's the biggest thing about respecting the game. You have to take just as much notice as you do in your teammates as the people that you're going to see every single day. These same officials are going to be repping every single game we have all the way up to the finals. So not knowing the names, not knowing how to respect them, what they prefer, that's something that I've tried to learn throughout the years. And just understanding each official and what they are, how they are, and how their emotions, how they react to certain things, how comfortable they are in moments of like tight in situations. And so that's something that I've tried to do a better job of understanding. Like some of the more veteran officials, you have to be more respectful, kind of approach them in a soft way versus kind of being aggressive and direct. Others, you kind of have to have that kind of confrontation because they don't take it personally. They just like they're passionate of the game. They're just competitive guys as we are. Others, you might just have to not say a word at all because you don't want to rile them up. So that's something you learn year over year. Something that I feel like same with players. Players, as much as we have to learn the referees have to learn the players. Sometimes, like for example, when the next rookie comes in, he won't know anyone, so he's just going to be himself. So sometimes I think that's what we have to do a better job of as a league, and just understanding that each player is going to be different in ways of how they communicate. Each player uses different verbiage. Each player uses different hand signals, motions of how they just like feel disagreements. Same with officials, and some officials may call something that others won't. So just understanding consistency and making sure that the things that are understood and respected, the things that are wanted in the league, we communicate, and things that are unwanted, we communicate as well.
Did you reach out to the official at all?
I'm not allowed to. I definitely would have, but I texted throughout the chain and just apologized and tried my best to make sure that they know it wasn't personal. It's one of those things that your emotion kind of gets you in a moment. And there was no intent in the matter at all.
So is there a rule disallowing you from speaking?
Yeah, there's no players can't communicate with officials off the court.
So when you say you get it through the chain, how did you go about that?
So there's like these liaisons between the NBA and the players, and as well as NBA through the union. So just text through that and just make sure the message is heard. Whether that's communicated, I don't know. I don't know how that gets trickled down the chain, but. Did my part and did my best to understand that.
Is there a fear that, for lack of a better term, that this will impact your relationship with officials?
I don't believe so. I hope that one moment doesn't dictate 3 years of communication and respect. So that's I've never thought of that as being a thing, nor do I think of that moving forward. For me, I'm gonna try and do a better job, just probably not communicating as much, just to understand that the game is more important than anything else. If off the court, then yeah, I'll be respectful and communicate more, but I try my best to hold my tongue as much as I can.
How's this process been for you over the past couple of days, knowing that this suspension might come and reflecting on it?
Yeah, it's kind of disappointing for me because I've never been ejected in my life, never been suspended in my life. Not even ISS or OSS. So something that for me is kind of unique and kind of rare, and kind of you take a step back. In the moment you kind of live it, you're like, why am I suspended and everything else? But then you realize it's for the betterment of the league, it's for the betterment of yourself, for the betterment of everyone around you. So for me, I just got to take ownership of that and make sure I take that on the head myself and move on with the right mentality moving forward.
Not much more that needs to be said here. It's a one-game suspension. Clearly, he says very unintentional, and he tried to get out of the way. So I'm going to take his word for it. I've said what I've said. I think the part of the problem is that the video looks inconclusive. I never thought that he's the type of person that's going to intentionally run through a referee, but you never know when somebody's emotions get the best of them. But he says completely unintentional. I tried to get out of the way. Fine. I'm done with it, but it's a lesson learned. And I like the fact that he said in there somewhere that he has to get better about this. And he has to sometimes learn to not talk. And he is a talker and he does want to be heard and all of that stuff. It's just very important for Grant to understand. And for, all basketball players to understand that there's a point where it just becomes counterproductive. And yes, you talk to the refs. Every NBA player talks to the refs. Every player wants to know, I don't think I fouled him. And a lot of times when you don't think you fouled somebody, a lot of times you did. Now, some of those calls like that block charge, tough one. It's a bang, bang play. It's hard to tell. And it's a judgment call. You're upset, whatever. The call before that was a bad call for sure. But still, don't let them pile up. Don't let those things pile up. And it's hard. It's easy for me to say I'm sitting in a chair in front of a microphone. I've been there, not at the NBA level, but when you're in the middle of a game, emotions run high. It is very, very difficult to keep yourself in check. But at that level, that's just something that you have to do just a little bit better. You just have to understand that. You just take a breath, and then you can go during the next free throw and say, what was that? And, have a conversation with the refs. Then that's a little bit better. So just take it down a notch, but I appreciate him at least acknowledging that he has to be better and better about his emotions. That's it. Grant's going to miss this game against the Cavaliers. That's going to be a tough one because that's a game where they could use Grant, and I'm going to talk about all of that next with Chris Manning of the Locked On Cavaliers podcast. That's the next two segments. First, Prize Picks, daily fantasy made easy, daily fantasy made fun. I think I got all three of my picks right last night when I made the picks here on the Locked On Celtics. So I'm going to cut my losses, but it was very, very simple. You go to the page, you go to all of these different sports, then they have everything, NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball, NHL. I mean, everything that you could ask for, college sports, European sports, things like disc golf, boxing. You can pick over-unders from anything. And that's all you have to do is pick the over-unders on 2 to 5 players. And if you do, you win potentially up to 10 times your money on any entry. And you're not playing against me. You're not playing against a bunch of people. You're just playing against the projections. You get it right, you win. Very simple. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less, so it's super easy. Safe and fast withdrawals, so you get your money when you want it. And it's operational in over 30 states and Canada. So download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up today to play daily fantasy sports. But the best part is first-time users get 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. So you use that promo code and deposit 100, you get 100. If you deposit 50, you get 50 from PrizePicks. So don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match of up to $100 at PrizePicks or download the PrizePicks app. Celtics-Cavs Friday night. That means it's time to do a crossover. And whenever it's Cavs talk, it's always Chris Manning, Locked On Cavs podcast. What's going on, Chris?
Not a whole lot, John. Glad to be with you. Glad to be talking about a good Cavs-Celtics matchup, as the Cavs have been bad for a while and improved last year, but this feels fun. And they're going to see each other next week as well. So this is a fun little early season matchup.
Yeah, it's you guys are 3-1. You've been led in scoring by Mr. Donovan Mitchell 3 out of those 4 games. So let's just start there. How's life with Donovan Mitchell?
Donovan Mitchell is, breaking news, John, really good at basketball.
Oh, hold on. Let me write this
down. Yeah. Like, put this in your notes.
Good at basketball? Okay.
Yeah, dare I say maybe great at basketball. He has been really, really good. And the Orlando game was his kind of one bad game so far. But in the 3 first games of the year, he comes out just being very explosive, very aggressive. You can tell that they have adjusted some scheme things to kind of take what worked for him in Utah and make it work within what Cleveland has. He's like particularly juiced Cedi Osman into being a functional wing, which was not a thing a lot of the time the last couple of years. He has carried the offense in large part without Darius Garland, who hasn't played since the second quarter of opening night due to this eye laceration, and will not be playing in Boston. So he's been awesome. He has been everything the Cavs could have asked him to be. He has been dynamic, explosive, and I think really impressive. And I think coming off in particular of his pretty bad defensive performance against Dallas last year with Utah in his last run with Utah, he is not, I'm not going to say he's been like a lockdown defender, but he has been competent and aware, and it has been an A+ grade so far for Donovan Mitchell with the Cavs.
Okay. So let's just, you mentioned this, Darius Garland, definitely not playing.
Yes, definitely not playing. The latest we know is that he's going to not play Friday. I have no idea if he's going to play Sunday against New York. That was kind of the original targeted thing, was the broad weekend.
Yeah.
It looks like he's going to be wearing goggles when he comes back. His eye was still
Always
closed.
awesome.
Yes, it looks cool, but the eye still looks swollen from the images we've seen, and he's been wearing sunglasses at the last couple home games. So if he's in Boston on Friday, I suspect he may be wearing a black pair of sunglasses.
Okay, well, that's a nice trade-off. I mean, Darius Garland for you guys, Grant Williams for the Celtics. So, I mean, each team is down a guy. So that works. And look, if you're losing Darius Garland for a little while, he's going to be okay. Then that works out for Boston. What doesn't work out for Boston, though, is the Cavs are a tall team, and tall is good for basketball. And tall and good is better. You got two tall, good guys. And I heard you guys talking on Locked On Cavs about Jared Allen becoming more of a playmaker, which is a little bit of a scary proposition, because we know that we know what Evan Mobley can be. And we know what Jared Allen, we've seen Jared Allen. And defensively, that's scary. Like, one of the things that I'm most afraid of is that guys are going to turn a corner on a pick and roll, and they're going to be like, oh, wait a minute. Nope. I'm just going to take this jumper. And the Celtics are a very jumper happy team. So I'm afraid of that. But if on the other end, Jared Allen is becoming a playmaker, then that makes things especially difficult for the Celtics.
It is interesting because they're not like thrown. It is in a way where they're letting him operate from the elbow a little bit. He will throw passes to back cutters that are darting towards the other block. He will do DHOs, and they're basically adding in some layers to the offense that I think were needed. This was an offense last year that could be pretty stagnant at times, was below average in terms of efficiency. I think really didn't put a lot of fear in opposing defenses. It's one of the reasons why, like, if they would have actually made the playoffs, I think they would have had a really hard time. It's why Donovan Mitchell, as a trade piece, made a lot of sense for them, just because they needed someone to really juice what they could do in the half court. And if Allen last year added some post-up stuff, that it still looks like it's there. But the passing thing is new. He was very uncomfortable with it when he came to Cleveland. It looks like now that it's not anything crazy. They're just asking him to make pretty basic reads within the structure and make the right decision. But he's done it so far, and particularly, like, there's some high-low action with him and Mobley. Karis LeVert will run through and cut to him. I think Mitchell could make sense as a back cutter. It's a little wrinkle that I do think has mattered and will make the Cavs a little harder to defend. And if particularly if Boston has a lot of good wing defenders, Tatum, Smart, Brown. But if there's like opportunities where he can pick on like whoever's guarding Mobley, if it's like Blake Griffin with Grant Williams out, or no Time Lord, obviously, like there are opportunities where I think Allen's passing could maybe play a factor in that sense.
So, what's been the key for the Cavs in winning these games? Is it a combination of things, or has it been just Donovan Mitchell coming out and being that number one, or, well, I guess number one in can't be a 1A with Garland out, but I heard you guys talking a lot about a lot of different things.
Yeah.
You've mentioned Dean Wade. You're having some issues with Okoro, who I always worried about defensively, but what's been the key for Cavs when they're playing their best so far? What do they look like?
It's been a lot of Mitchell dictating things, I think. Like, Mitchell has been very explosive in the half court. He is pushing the pace. He is creating good looks for other people. Like, Jetty Osman's maybe the best encapsulation of this in a very, very weird way. One of the things he has done is really just get Jetty and Dean Wade and other guys like very clean looks on threes, and particularly in the corner. He is putting so much pressure on defenses that the other looks are coming easier. And they're also I think it's Mitchell plus buy-in from basically everybody else. Like, I don't think Mobley has, maybe the Orlando game was the best he's played, but he hasn't had like a really great game yet after he missed the preseason for the most part. Allen just had his best game of the year against Orlando. But like it's been, I think, all these guys kind of buying in to what the Cavs need them to do. and Bickerstaff leaning on what is working on a given night. Like Dean Wade just started for the first time. He looked good. He's ridden Jetty more than I think I would have expected, considering I don't think he's the biggest Jetty fan in the world at times. But it starts from Mitchell, and that's everyone else kind of buying in, figuring stuff out, playing well, and playing within their role. And also just empowering guys in the right way. It's Jetty Osm corner threes. It's just Mobley in offensive situations that he's good at. It's Jarrett Allen getting runs at the rim and getting to dunk and do Jarrett Allen things. It's all this stuff, but it all starts with Mitchell. And I think some of what he's unlocked within the Cavs offense and just making them a more functional basketball team in a lot of ways.
Yeah, that's with the guys, with no Grant, obviously no Rob. There's going to be, and one of the defensive issues that I think the Celtics have had has been perimeter. They have not been very good at containing that dribble penetration. It was especially bad against the Chicago Bulls. It was not quite as bad, but still not 100% great in previous games. And you just heard a lot of the Celtics talking about that in the past couple of days. Got to impact the ball. Got to get up there and just communicate and just be aware of who you're guarding and what that person is capable of. So it's going to be a real challenge guarding Donovan Mitchell. He's averaging 28.5 points, and he's running pick and rolls with all of these very serious weapons. I am afraid of that Celtics, that drop coverage. Maybe that drop coverage can take away some of what Mobley and what Allen can do, but I'm afraid that Mitchell is going to walk into, if the Celtics aren't as crisp as they need to be, and hopefully with 3 days off they can be, but if they aren't as crisp as they need to be, I'm afraid of Mitchell just walking into open shots. And if you're setting that pick high enough and the Celtics still decide to chase over the top, I just ready for Donovan Mitchell to take. I mean, he's averaging 8 3-point attempts. He might take 13 or 14 against the Celtics.
Yeah, and on top of that, like one of the things with Mobley in particular I think he's most comfortable with on offense, John, is when he gets in spots where he can take one dribble or one long step because his legs are stretchy, he can get to the rim and be very effective. He's not strong enough to be a kind of traditional post-up guy. His jump shot we'll see how that turns out over the course of the season. Like I need to see it before we talk about it. His best attribute as a scorer right now is he gets the ball at the elbow or they flash him to the free throw line and he gets one step. He uses his quickness in his dribble and he can get there. His handle is a little loose, so there's opportunity for like Horford or someone to be really smart and cagey and poke it free. But if he executes in those spots or he gets the ball, they run a pick and roll with him and Mitchell, and he gets a bounce pass and has to take one dribble, make a decision, and go. He's gonna, I think, have some success there. Like he will have, I think, opportunities to try and do that against drop, and he'll have to be physical. He'll have to try to dunk it. He'll have to get to be willing to go to the free throw line. Stuff that he doesn't always do yet because he's just still kind of young and kind of slender still. But there's room there for him to kind of attack it in that way too, I think.
If the Cavs are going to lose this game, what would happen for the Cavs to lose this game to the Celtics?
I think the biggest thing for me is that I still do not trust this. I don't think I ever will until the roster changes, to be honest with you. I don't think this is a team that is built to stop the kind of wings Boston has. Mm-hmm. I think the Williams suspension helps us a little bit because it takes away one of the corner three options that you might have. Now, maybe like Sam Hauser gets hot. Maybe the guards like Brogdon and Smart and White all kind of get hot as well, and that kind of eats this up. Or maybe Horford has like a really good shooting night or whatever. But I think like this is not a team that, as it's currently constructed, is built to defend like these apex predator wings. I don't think they have a good answer for Tatum. And Tatum, like for my money, John, like you can tell me if you disagree. I think he might have be the best player in the league so far to start the season. He's been incredible and very precise and decisive. Like I think if they try to put Dean Wade on him, Dean Wade's going to get smoked. I think if they put Okoro on him, who's a solid defender, he's going to be too small to handle Tatum. He's just too small to handle Paolo Banchero and had like a real issue in that matchup. And now he's going to have to defend Tatum. I don't know how that's going to go. Their best answer long term might be Mobley, but are you going to change your whole defensive scheme to have Mobley play on ball like that the entire game? I would guess no. You'll see a lot of Mobley and Allen switching when it comes to it to defend those guys, but that exposes you to other things. And I don't know if they fully can slow Tatum, but also Tatum and Brown for 48 minutes at a high enough level, maybe enough to win in one game, but if this was like a playoff series, that would be like the first thing I'm looking at if I'm Boston, is saying this is a big weakness in the Cavs roster. We have to exploit that, and I think Boston obviously is pretty well equipped to do that.
Dean Wade definitely has the size, but does he have the lateral quickness is going to be the question. And I think Tatum's right there, and people might say Giannis, but Tatum's been right there at the top of the list so far through 4 games. Jaylen Brown is another guy that after the past couple of games, he had 2 awesome games. He had one kind of a stinker of a game, and his last game was okay. And so I kind of expect Jaylen after a few days off to come in. I think Jaylen's a little kind of worked up about off the court stuff too. And I think he wants to come in and just kind of put the focus back on the floor.
You don't say, John, that he might be expressing some opinions not on basketball right now that are taking up some mental space.
Yeah, he might be a little occupied by such things. But I saw him at practice actually all week, but before on Thursday, he's out. He spent a lot of time on Thursday working. He had a wild drill where he's just basically going 1-on-3. He had the guys with the cones on their hands, and there's made him like 8 feet tall, and he's shooting over the top of those guys. So Jaylen's getting ready for the big length that he's going to face. I mean, he's trying to shoot over the top of like they look like the wavy used car inflatable guy. So he's getting ready for that. It's going to be a question of I think the Celtics, honestly, without Robert Williams and still kind of integrating a couple of new elements, Brogdon and, working Sam Hauser in and just starting Derek White. They might just be an offense first team, and their defense is just going to have to be good enough to get through. That said, there has been some variance. I think some teams have been hitting some tough shots against them. So this is going to be a good back and forth, man. I expect this one to be like 130 to 120, and I don't know who's going to win.
Yeah, I was looking at before we started recording, I went and looked at like the cleaning the glass, like just offensive rating, defensive rating stuff. The Celtics third in offense in the league right now, 119.6.
Yeah.
It's like 7 points above, that's 7.3 points above league average right now. Defensively, the Cavs had the second best defensive rating in the league, giving up 103.9 per 100. So like this is the Celtics offense meets the Cavs defense, and like the Cavs offense has been better with Mitchell. I don't know how it's like 8th right now, but they've played some bad teams and had some like I don't totally buy 8th in offense unless like it's particularly without Garland. Like maybe it ends up being around there, but like without Garland, that feels like Mitchell's just been out of his mind in a lot of ways. And I mean, I'm really excited to see Marcus Smart defend and Brogdon and all these guys. I'm excited to see how they defend Donovan Mitchell. Every team has tried something different. Boston feels like a team, and it kind of like Toronto has all these guys to throw a lot of different looks at him, even if you're missing Time Lord to be that, kind of off ball, close you down and you at the rim kind of guy. They have a bunch of perimeter options to defend Mitchell that I'm curious to see how he looks. And, if you're Boston, I'm sure you're pretty comfortable with Mitchell feeding off the Karis LeVert, feeding off the Jetty Osman, like feeding off the Isaac Okoro, like if he plays more than like 10 minutes. Like I'm sure you're very comfortable with those outcomes if you're Boston as well, and kind of massaging a good defensive performance out of this game.
That's the goal. I mean, I'd rather have that than the alternative. Before we wrap up, any impressions on the other side from of the Celtics so far? If you've seen any initial thoughts about what you've seen from Boston after 4 games?
I mentioned him already, but I think Tatum's just been incredible. I have a buddy from college who is a diehard Celtics fan. And when I was watching clips of Boston when we talked about recording and just getting ready for Friday's game, I went back and just watched a bunch of Tatum offensive possessions. And John, tell me if this is wrong. I feel like he's more decisive. Mm-hmm. I feel like he's more poised. I feel like everything after coming off of last year, making the finals, he's hitting that like next step in superstardom, which is no wasted movement, no wasted like looks. Everything is just kind of flowing really nicely off of Tatum right now. And like I just think, okay, like he's such that position, guys at that size it's such an advantage if you're them in this kind of matchup. The other thing is the defense is it just feels a little different just with a Time Lord, and I don't know how you scheme out of that. Like, I don't know what the answer is with, like, Horford obviously had a great year last year, but he's not going to replicate what Time Lord did. Like, I get like them going to get like Blake Griffin after the Gallo injury. Like, I understand that impulse, but like he's not going to provide the defensive stuff if he were to play. Like, you don't have like a way to replace what Time Lord does, and like that just changes the defensive identity a little bit. Now, as you know, I mean, much better than I do, that was so key to them ascending the way they did last year, right? So like that I'm curious to see how they navigate that while Time Lord makes his way back, and when he comes back, like how they manage him just to keep him healthy for when this really matters, and when what this team's ultimate, success or failure will kind of look like. So those are the two things for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's the defense has been a work in progress, let's say. That was my big topic for 2 days after that loss to Chicago. They're just it's going to rely on their perimeter defense more than at any point in the past few years, because they're just deciding we're going to go deep drop coverage, and the perimeter guys have to be running the ball handler off that line into some long twos or into the teeth of the defense. They just have to be stronger about making that ball handler feel them chasing. And defensively, to me, it's just a matter of figure it out, be good enough, and let the offense, which has the potential to be really, really good, let that carry the day until Rob gets back, and then you go from there. We can talk a whole lot more about Jayson Tatum. Why don't we do that on your podcast?
That's right.
That sounds good. All right, so that's going to do it for us here. But if you want to hear more, crossover episode continues over at Locked On Cavs. Chris Manning, thanks a lot for hopping on.
Thanks, John.
Thanks to Chris. We had a great conversation on his podcast. So again, make sure to check that out. Also, make sure that you are checking out Locked On Sports Today. Make that your second listen after Locked On Celtics. Locked On Sports Today has the games that matter, and the biggest stories in all sports go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On provide. Locked On Sports Today is available everywhere you get your podcast and on YouTube, just like this podcast. Wherever you got this one, get that one. If you haven't subscribed to this one, please subscribe to this one. Comment on the YouTube page and share the podcast to your friends and family and everybody. They should be listening to and watching the Locked On Celtics podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.